Greetings, and welcome, Sunday Rants. And it is July 25th, 6 p.m. Pacific time. I am your host, James Arnsberger, and this is Sunday Rants. So what I thought we would do is talk a little bit tonight on just the continuation. It appears to me, at least from everything I'm reading and everything that I'm monitoring and watching, that this entire segment of wrongful convictions continues to grow. In other words, we're not seeing fewer cases, we're actually seeing more cases. And these go back, 10 years, 15, 20, 25, 30 years. If you overlay the timeline of where we are today from when these convictions happened, and you look at the political climate, you look at the war on drugs, the war on crime. The war on crime actually started with Lyndon Baines Johnson after Kennedy was assassinated in the Great Society campaign, and a compromise that was worked out with Congress to get tough on crime. And every president from Johnson forward has, at the federal level, has certainly supported that initiative. And when we look at the overlay based on this timeline, I believe that you can at least anecdotally surmise that we're seeing a lot more cases now because the sophistication of DNA, the sophistication of investigation, the laws have evolved, evidence has come forward. There's a whole host of dynamics that contribute to the contributions of somebody being exonerated that was wrongfully convicted. And I would suspect, like I predicted 35 some odd years ago, that we're going to see a lot more of these cases coming forward. Unfortunately, here in California, I think California, and I think this was a UC Berkeley study that was done. California is, if I recall correctly, is the toughest state in the country to overturn a conviction, a wrongful conviction. And I think that's going to be changing. I think that we've got a new piece of legislation going into effect January of 2022, that if there was race bias or an indication of race bias in the jury, in other words, bumping a minority off of the jury, then I think that's going to make it at least a little bit easier in those kinds of cases to get either a new trial or start the process toward exoneration. So I think part of the problem is that the perspective that we're looking at and how these cases came to be where they are right now, and when they started. And so there's a lot more literature out there, scholarly writings and things like that I continue to review and read. This is important, at least in regard to the effort of CalFIJA, the California Fully Informed Jury Association, because the education, I think, and just the basic understanding and the knowledge of the problem, I think there's a big vacuum of a lack of good information, quality information about the problem itself. And unless we're directly affected, we're probably, it's not probably at the top of our priority list of things that we've got to take care of or work on or do something about. Sadly, we all pay for it. We all pay for it in the cost, the taxpayer dollars, the impacts on our communities, the families that are affected by that, the lack of trust and confidence in the police, the investigators, the experts, the prosecutors, the court, the judge, the jury. We have far less confidence in those systems today than we've had in recent history. And I think part of that problem is that we do very little to really help people understand how this process works and where it breaks down. There are surely studies out there that, and we've got those up on our website that you can go read, that sort of give a comparative of the kinds of cases, the kinds of crimes where the wrongful conviction, the kinds of evidence, and those kinds of things that make up the composition of a whole host of reasons why wrongful convictions happen. But disproportionately, there's no argument, and there can be no question that disproportionately African American, Hispanic, and Asian American defendants have a significantly harder time in the criminal justice system than their white counterparts. And I think anybody that suggests that that's not true just simply is in la la land or hasn't read any of these studies. So rather than beat that drum, I think what we are getting ready to do as we go into August and launch our public awareness campaign, really it's just about the education and the outreach and public education of the systemic problem surrounding wrongful conviction as a subject here in California, and look at that in the composition of the trial and the crime, and look to educating the public at large, even our elected officials, city council, mayors, county board of supervisors, prosecutors, judges, the courts, civic groups, churches, everybody, because this affects everybody in every community. And I think our initial campaign will be an outreach of about 250,000 people starting here in San Diego County. And it's an initial pilot program. It'll be an email campaign, a direct mail campaign, and a public speaking webinar kind of thing, or some actual opportunities to visit some of the colleges and universities, some of the civic groups and organizations, and just simply share the information about the epidemic of wrongful conviction. Second to that, I think our efforts will focus on the trial jury system at large here in California, particularly in a criminal case, and where the problems that, and it's not just me, there's a lot of people that have pointed to a host of problems in the trial jury system, how the jury pool is formed, how the jury commissioner is appointed and selected, how the voir dire process, jury selection, the challenges for somebody being bumped off of a jury, particularly if it's a race, less than race neutral challenge. These are problems that contribute to a system that is not working in terms of people that are wrongfully convicted that go through the criminal process, the criminal trial process. And so I think those will be the two lanes, if you will, that we'll be traveling, developing in this pilot program. Just a public outreach and awareness. We'll be reaching out to all of the media, print media, radio, TV, podcast, and blogs, trying to build a coalition of participation from the community at large, starting here in San Diego County, around the education, not only of the wrongful conviction problem, but the jury system itself. And while much can be said about the benefits of our system of criminal justice being a model for the world, When you look at the statistics, we don't have a very good record to be touting as a model that we want to champion. And I think what we should do before we start telling other countries how to fashion their systems, we should make sure ours is working at least better than it's working right now. To have the numbers of thousands and thousands of people that have already been exonerated, that were wrongfully convicted, there's no question that the system is broken, at least in several thousand cases there. And there's probably tens of thousands more somewhere in the line in the process, waiting to get their fair share of justice and to go into court. Once there's a conviction, the court looks at it as, that was established. You had a jury trial, you were found guilty, and the courts, particularly here in California, are just very reluctant to take a second look. And it's just such a high hurdle. And even in the cases that were so blatantly obvious, and people had spent 25, 30 years in prison, and you look at the evidence that was presented, and it still took them years to get exonerated. It's like, why is that? And it's because the system is set up in a way that doesn't have credibility and doesn't have an interest in going back and finding fault with what the outcome or the result was. And it's sort of like I had mentioned before, that it's really close the case or solve the crime. And we've had this attitude about closing the case and to hell with solving the crime. We got somebody, and if they didn't do this, they probably did something else. And I've actually seen those quotes by people that have made those statements in the criminal justice system, and it's just shocking. It's breathtaking. So I think we'll have more information as we go into August, laying out our campaign. Will be John will be helping us with getting the website updated on CalFeja and on the Sunday Rants, so that you can look at that program that we're going to be launching as initial pilot program, and there's something that you can find that you can do to share the message and to spread that word, even if it's just in your circle of influence of the people that the more that we can get the word out, and the more that we can communicate and share that message, that there is a problem. We're not talking about how to solve it, because you can't even begin to solve it until you acknowledge and recognize that it's a serious problem. And what we've got to do is we've got to focus on message and messaging and getting that out to educate the public of these two areas that I think are fundamental if we ever hope to bring about any meaningful reform now or anytime in the future. With regard to our efforts with the IRS nonprofit, we're literally waiting any day now to have our letter. And then we've got a little paperwork to do with the California State Attorney General. We've got to register there. So again, we're not taking any donations at this time. I mean, we can and still give that letter, but we've decided that we're going to wait until we actually have all the paperwork and get our initial ducks in a row, if you will, before we start doing any kind of fundraising. Basically, we've got the benefit of some funding for in-kind donations to pay for these campaigns and be able to take that financial burden. And we appreciate that effort so that we can at least begin to formulate a game plan for the next year in how we're going to move forward in educating the public at large with regard to the jury reforms, the jury system in a trial jury, educating the participation of more of the public at large, making the pool, the jury pool, larger, not smaller, making it more reflective of our community and inclusive of everybody in the community. Here in California, it's not going to be limited to just people that are on the register voter rolls in driver's license. Anybody that filed a tax return will now be included in the jury pool. And so we want a more congruent method of widening the jury pool of a jury of our peers and inclusive of every community in terms of people that can participate. I think that the economics of jury service need to be revisited also, and we need to look at some of the challenges that prevent people from wanting to serve on a jury and see what we can do in those areas. And I'm sure that all of our elected officials, in their great wisdom on high of being able to pontificate all of the ways that we should be regulated in living our life, I'm sure they could come up with a couple of solutions to figure out the economics of jury service so that we have a little bit more of a balance that can be more inclusive of everybody in our communities around the entire state. So with that said, I look forward to our next Sunday Rants. I should be able by that time to give you a little bit more crystal clear update of our pilot initiatives that we'll be launching in August. It's going to take us about 6 to 8 weeks to roll all of this out. So we're working with a lot of different folks that are going to be helping us coordinate our email campaign and our direct mailing campaign and our outreach and public awareness campaign. But we're already working on that, and we've made a lot of progress. Again, just think in your mind what it must be like and try to imagine anybody that you know or care about sitting in prison for decades for a crime that they didn't commit, and how hopeless and helpless that must feel. So there's more that we need to do in terms of helping at least bring about meaningful reforms to right now a criminal justice system that at best is a failure, at least in the thousands of cases of the people that have been exonerated. It certainly failed them and failed our community. With that, have a great rest of the Sunday. If you're here in San Diego, looks like we're going to get a little bit of a thunderstorm. It's kind of shaping up a little bit. But anyway, thank you for your attention on Sunday Rants. I am James Hernsberger, your host. I will see you next Sunday on Sunday Rants. With that said, peace out.